Welcome to another episode of AutoMundial, the weekly car news and review show where this week we're taking a look at the new Ineos Grenadier, a no-nonsense 4x4 going up against the new Land Rover Defender.
We also have McLaren's take on a GT car and a four-door version of the BMW 8 Series, as well as a new electric concept car from Audi. The Bentley Bentayga, one of our favourite luxury SUVs, has been updated. In an inside-out overhaul, the updated and facelifted Bentayga features Bentley's latest design DNA that we've seen on the latest Continental GT and Flying Spur models, including the elliptical taillights that replace the much bulkier units from the old car. While at first glance it may seem like a subtle facelift, every panel at the front of the car has been updated, with the new headlights sitting higher up to create a meaner look. Elsewhere, the new Bentayga gets some new exhausts and a different rear spoiler, while the interior has also had a refresh, with new infotainment and a redesigned rear bench seat. From launch, facelifted cars will only be available with the 542 brake horsepower V8, with the W12 and hybrid models still to come.
Following the recent release of the new BMW 8 Series and the subsequent M8, BMW has given its big GT the Gran Coupe treatment. That's to say, it's added a pair of doors to create a more usable everyday long-distance cruiser. While the 8 Series reception was a little lackluster, with many critics, us included, marking it out as not quite special enough, the 8 Series Gran Coupe could be the sweet spot that wins us over. With a longer wheelbase, higher roofline and more purposeful stunts, the new flagship four-door could well be the pick of the range. The additional size adds a certain charisma, and in our eyes it looks even better than the regular coupe. The front end is carried over from the regular car, but the windscreen is more upright, allowing for taller roofline and the resulting better headroom. It tapers nicely towards the back, where you find a pleasingly subtle lip on the boot lid. The whole look of the car just seems to flow a bit more naturally. Unsurprisingly, it's a bit heavier than the regular car, 70 kilos heavier to be precise. Suspension therefore has had an upgrade. Adaptive dampeners come as standard on all models, and it's available with the same range of engines producing the same power figures. That means an entry-level all-wheel drive diesel, a rear-wheel drive 336 brake horsepower petrol, and a twin-turbo 526 brake horsepower V8 in the all-wheel drive M850i. Sitting below the monstrous M8 version, the M850i can get from 0 to 62 miles per hour in 3.9 seconds, putting it 0.1 of a second down on its main rival, the Porsche Panamera Turbo.
Like the BMW, the Panamera uses a twin-turbo V8, putting out more power at 542 brake horsepower. Also, like the 850i, it's an all-wheel drive, meaning incredible grip and performance in almost all conditions. On the outside, it won't win any beauty contests, especially against the Gran Coupe, but it is a vast improvement over older models. It's on the inside though where the Panamera really excels. The high transmission tunnel adds to the sporty feel of the car, and it's covered with touch-sensitive controls. In the middle of the dash sits a fabulous 12.3-inch touchscreen showcasing Porsche's latest infotainment system, which is a joy to use. It gets internet access, Google Earth, Street View, and even up-to-date fuel prices. The graphics are clear and precise, and the car gets a futuristic ambience as a result. The centre console flows all the way to the back, splitting the two rear seats, where occupants are treated to a bit more space than they get in the 8 Series. The Panamera is a heavy car, but the suspension wizardry does a great job of disguising it, allowing you to feel its 911 DNA.
And then there's this, the outrageous Mercedes AMG GT63 S 4MATIC Plus 4-door coupe. And if you think that's a mouthful, Wait until you hear the stats. 639 horsepower, 900 newton meters of torque, 3.2 seconds to 62, and a top speed of almost 200 miles per hour. It's the definition of a super saloon, bullying lesser vehicles into the middle lane with its turbocharged 4-litre V8. The cabin is sportier than a regular Merc saloon's, with a chunky flat-bottom steering wheel and high centre console. Underneath though, it's every bit the sports car. It gets some massive brakes to help control its bulk, and some trick suspension with various settings. It even has a drift mode, allowing the all-wheel drive 2-ton monster to get seriously leery. But for those who don't need quite so much performance, there's a marginally more sensible version with a measly 585 horsepower and no drift button.
But the BMW also gets some trick chassis bits. Four-wheel drive cars get active steering, and all models get stiffer springs to reduce body roll. To reduce it even further, BMW is offering optional active roll stabilisation to allow the Gran Coupe to corner like a proper M car. And there's an M Sport differential too, although only fitted as standard on the M850i. Much work has been done to keep the weight down too, although it could never be as light as the two-door. A plastic boot lid, endless aluminium and some fancy carbon fibre bits keep it from being as overweight as it could have been. Since BMW started building its Gran Coupes, the four doors have always been popular, the extra bit of length resulting not only in a more refined ride, but better looks too. And the 8 Series is no exception, and to our eyes it's the best looking BMW on sale.
Since McLaren returned to building road cars in 2011 with the MP4-12C, it's stuck to a pretty simple formula. A carbon fibre tub at the front and a turbocharged V8 in the middle. It's a perfect supercar recipe that has seen the relative newcomers take on the likes of Ferrari and Lamborghini with great success. But while that layout is great for drivers who want to feel every undulation and crack in the road surface, surely it isn't the obvious choice for a comfortable, long-distance Grand Tourer. Well, that hasn't stopped Woking's finest trying with this, the new McLaren GT. Designed to take on Aston Martin and Bentley, the GT aims to carve out a new category in McLaren's sport, super and ultimate lineups. This isn't the first time McLaren has used the GT moniker though. In 2016, the 570 GT was introduced as a slightly more practical version of the junior supercar. This though is the full fat version, and perhaps a hint that McLaren may be planning something front-engined with more seats. Instead of going all out and developing a new platform, the GT is testing the water to see if there are enough buyers to justify a real Grand Tourer. But what's this one like? Well, the first thing you'll have noticed is the styling. It's a bit different from the brand's regular design language, yet it's still instantly recognisable as a McLaren. We're not convinced by it though. The front end looks a little too high, and the chunky front bumper leaves little room for the squinty headlights. It doesn't have the beautiful curves of the 720 S or the presence of a P1 or Senna. This is a GT car though, and as such it's designed to be practical. The high front end means it has the same ground clearance as a normal saloon car, meaning the optional nose lift system is a box best left unticked. It also has quite a big boot underneath the glass tailgate, big enough for a set of golf clubs, 2 pairs of skis or a small dog, probably. Sitting above the engine though, McLaren has taken extra care to insulate the boot floor, while also using cool air ducting to stop stuff melting. There's another boot up front, a fruit, if you will, big enough for a couple of carry-ons, giving the GT a total luggage capacity of 570 litres. And the GT-ness doesn't stop there. It gets a plush cabin full of wondrous materials and fine leathers. The steering wheel is completely devoid of buttons, adding to the minimalist, luxurious atmosphere. Don't get us wrong, it's far from being a Rolls-Royce, but it isn't exactly pokey inside. Everything feels expensive and well made, yet it still feels just as sporty as a McLaren should. It gets a new infotainment system too, keeping the signature portrait central screen with crisp graphics that look bang up to date. Elsewhere in the cabin though, there's a distinct lack of cubbyholes to store things in, something that's not usually an issue in more traditional Grand Tourers.
But this is far from a traditional GT. Out on the road, the McLaren has been designed to be much sharper and driver-focused than a DB11 or Bentley Continental. McLarens have long been famed for their astonishing ride quality, and it's more than acceptable here, even compared to its front-engine rivals. It's much more fun to drive though, despite it being tuned more for comfort than its other V8 stablemates. The 4-litre motor puts out 612 brake horsepower, while 0 to 62 is dealt with in 3.2 seconds onto a top speed of 203 miles per hour. Price-wise, it sits just above its two main rivals, the Aston Martin DB11 and Bentley Continental GT. And while it is more driver-focused, it isn't as well equipped. The DB11 makes any journey into an event, especially if you go for the howling V12. The interior is a bit disappointing, but it's still one of the best looking cars on sale, and it's brimming with character. On the other hand, the Bentley has one of the best interiors that we've ever seen. Its blend of old world luxury and cutting edge tech works perfectly, while the 4-wheel drive system and W12 engine are much more exciting than you'd expect.
The McLaren then offers something a bit different, but we're not quite sure what it is. It isn't quite a proper GT car, but neither is it a true supercar. It'll be interesting to see how it sells, and if it inspires McLaren to build a proper front-engined coupe.
After the break, the Ineos Grenadier and the new Land Rover Defender.
Coming up, the new Land Rover Defender and its latest rival. But first...
Following on from last year's Q4 E-TRON concept, Audi has revealed this. The new Q4 Sportback E-TRON, a coupe version of the forthcoming electric SUV concept car. The two Q4 models will be the first Audis to make use of Volkswagen's MEB electric platform when they go on sale next year, rivaling the new Tesla Model Y. In true Sportback style, the main changes are to the roofline. It's lower than on last year's concept and features a steeply raked rear window split by a thin rear spoiler. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same as the regular car. It retains the chunky rear diffuser with the illuminated E-TRON script and the smart LED light bar running across the boot lid. It also makes use of some massive 22-inch wheels which look great, but we'd be surprised if they made it to production. The cabin has been copied and pasted from the 2019 car as well. No bad thing, as it's every bit as modern and cutting edge as you'd expect. It gets a weird hexagonal steering wheel and a 12.3-inch touchscreen infotainment system angled towards the driver. Powering the Q4 is an 82 kilowatt-hour battery, the largest supported by the MEB platform, that Audi reckons should be good for at least 280 miles on a charge. Power stands at 298 brake horsepower, with 0 to 62 dealt with in 6.3 seconds. We can also expect some smaller batteries borrowed from the VW ID.3. But Audi has confirmed that both all-wheel and rear-wheel drive options will be available when a production version is revealed in the coming months.
Over the last couple of decades, countless motoring icons have had a new lease of life. Volkswagen gave us the new Beetle, while BMW did a great job with the new Mini. The Fiat 500 continues to be updated, and there's even a new Ford Bronco on the way. But now, one of the most loved and recognisable cars in the world has been reborn, the Land Rover Defender. But before we get into the ins and outs of the new 4x4, let's start with the biggest change from the old model, the styling. Old Land Rovers were never meant to look good, they were simply built to be rugged and easy to work on. There was no real styling team for the old Defender, it was just the same basic shape for more than half a century, with bits added on over time. It became cool and a fashion statement in its later years simply because it was so utilitarian and focused. It had integrity, and that was what made it so appealing to the millions who bought them. To us though, this new one looks like it's trying quite hard. Styled by Jerry McGovern, the man responsible for the current Discovery, it looks like the love child of a Toyota FJ Cruiser and a Kia Soul. There are obvious hints to its predecessor, like the optional white roof and steel wheels, but they do seem like a bit of a gimmick. It's hard to see many other signs of the old car, but that shouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. As we said, the old model was just built to be practical, with little to no thought given to the way it looked. Therefore, should we really care what this one looks like? Well, it's clearly been through the JLR chintz department with its swanky LED lights and surplus silver trim bits. One thing we are a bit confused by though is the body-coloured square in the rear side windows, particularly on the short wheelbase 90, where they seem to serve no obvious purpose other than blocking the view from the rear seats. Then we get onto the trim levels. There are several on offer, with base spec 90 starting at just over £40,000. That's already more than you'd have expected to pay for the old one, but add a few options to a high-spec Defender and you'll easily hit six figures.
The new Defender then is as expensive as a Range Rover, and a Range Rover gets a much posher cabin, and it certainly isn't bad off-road either. So what do you get for all that cash? Well, quite simply, the new Defender is the best off-roader on sale right now. Land Rover is famed for its off-road technology, but the new Defender takes it to a whole new level. Both 90 and 110 models get clear sight, a series of cameras mounted around the vehicle which display exactly what each wheel is facing when you're off the beaten track. The Defender also gets the usual array of terrain response modes which can automatically calculate the type of ground that you're driving on and calibrate the settings accordingly. There's also a new wading program which closes the air vents and keeps the brakes lightly engaged to protect the discs and pads. The departure angles are almost as good as the old cars, while the maximum wading depth has been increased to a staggering 900mm, almost double the old Defenders. Inside, Land Rover has done a great job. It feels solid and hard wearing and incredibly practical. There are plug sockets and cup holders everywhere, and the major controls have all been designed to be operated with gloves on. Infotainment is aesthetically beautiful yet simple and in keeping with the Land Rover philosophy. It can receive over-the-air updates via satellite too, meaning your sat-nav will be up to date even in the middle of the Sahara. But if you aren't convinced by the new Defender, there is another way.
This is the all-new Ineos Grenadier. And right from the off, it's easy to see where the designers took their inspiration from. It may look like an old Land Rover, but everything on the Grenadier is bespoke and new. The brainchild of a British billionaire who was dismayed by the death of the old Defender, the Grenadier sets to fill the alleged gap in the market that Land Rover has left behind. Where the new Defender is a thoroughly modern vehicle, the Ineos is somewhat more old school, with a traditional ladder frame chassis and beam axles, which should lead to some fairly old-fashioned handling, reminiscent of the car it is so clearly influenced by. On that note, we should mention that JLR has already lost a court case regarding the Grenadier's styling. Due to be on sale by 2022, the Grenadier will initially be available as either a 5-door station wagon or a crew cab pickup truck. And while more typical SUVs may be better suited to motorway cruises than the Ineos, the Grenadier is aimed squarely at those who want a rugged vehicle to take off-road. Ineos is aiming it at those who bought old Defenders for more than their looks. Farmers, mountain rescue teams, explorers, etc. It all sounds rather promising then for those looking to replace their old Land Rover with something more modern, but in the same vein. The key to the old Defender's success, though, was its heritage and popularity. Something that the Ineos Grenadier is going to have to build over time. We have to say, though, we like what we've seen so far. Rough and ready 4x4s are few and far between these days, and with its form-following function design, we think Ineos could be on to a winner.
Join us again next week on AutoMundial as we take a look at a new limited edition Lamborghini.